Thank you everyone for joining us as we dive into PAC 101. My name is Rena. I'm your DPAC president for Surrey District 36 for this school year 2022/23. Lakbir, treasurer, will be joining us a little bit later to go over some financial guidelines that are also very important and part of PAC 101. There is a lot of information that we're going to be going over here today. So please, make sure that you do come back and review it from time to time, just to use it sort of as a refresher. Okay, so we're going to start off with looking at our history. We know that this is very important because it shapes who it is that we are and how we set our goals for our PACs and the work that we decide to take on for our PACs. So the history shows that it's been a long time getting us to where we are today. As you can see here, in 1915 is when the first official parent, and I put there in brackets, parent as defined in the School Act. So the first organization was launched at the Craig Flower School on the outskirts of Victoria, but it took about 30 to 40 years for change to actually happen. So staff at that time ran the schools and parents stayed out on the outskirts. In the 1970s and 80s, parents began questioning education policy structure and our lack of meaningful involvement. And this, of course, led to a larger group of parents getting together and seeing how they could possibly change that and how they could open the door for us to be able to enter into the schools and be part of our children's education. In 1988, the province of BC struck a Royal Commission on Education. Structure should be established at the provincial, school district, and school levels to ensure that parents are genuinely involved in advising educators and policymakers, local and provincial, in matters related to education programs, services, and operations. So right here in 1988 is when we actually were able to enter into the schools and be part of the education deliverance to our children. In 89, the Parent Advisory Councils were included in the School Act. So the School Act was amended to actually state that Parent Advisory Councils, or PACs, are actually part of the School Act. And so then you'll see here on the screen the definition of the Parent Advisory Council within the School Act is Parents Advisory Council through its elected officers may advise the board and the principal and staff of the school or the provincial school respecting any matter relating to the school or the provincial school. And now this here allowed us to be able to be in the school and have conversations around the education that was being delivered to our children. And if needed, it provided us the opportunity to make recommendations to the levels of government that could change how those programs were delivered to our children. In 2001, the School Act was amended again. It was amended to include the rights of parents to volunteer in public schools. So from 89 until 2001, we were able to come together as parents and discuss the education that was happening within our schools, but we weren't actually able to be involved inside the schools. In 2001, that then changed, allowing us to enter the schools and volunteer our time within those schools. So that was a huge step. So now it meant that parents were entering the classrooms to help out in the classrooms. Parents were now entering the schools, planning events to start promoting community engagement, and school community is what we call them within our schools. In 2002, the School Act was once again amended to include district parent advisory councils. So that would be us, DPAC. And you can see there What they added to the School Act was that District Parent Advisory Council may advise the board on any matter relating to education in the school district. A District Parents Advisory Council must make bylaws governing its meetings and the business and conduct of its affairs, including bylaws governing the dissolution of the council. So applying similar rules that apply to PACs. And then 3, a superintendent of schools for the school district, a designate of the superintendent, or a trustee of the school district may attend any meeting of the District Parent Advisory Council. Now this, you can all see that it does happen. We usually have one of the trustees assigned to us every school year, and they are then in attendance to our meetings. Our superintendent doesn't attend at this time, but the school trustee does. Being one of the largest school districts, it can be understandable that the superintendent would not have the time to attend our meetings, but hopefully that will change in the near future. So looking back at how we started is very important. It reminds us that PACs were not created to fundraise. That's not to say that there is anything wrong with fundraising, because we know that each dollar raised goes towards our children. However, let's not forget to continue to have discussions about how our children are doing within our schools. Do not stop asking, are they being served the way that they should be? Is their safety top priority? Is access to education being provided to all students? And I say that last one, with a lot of importance, because we do need to be aware of which of those children are being left out. And we do need to start addressing that. PACs have a responsibility to put forward recommendations to the school about those children that are being left out. And so that is something to take back with you and let your PAC know. So diving into the structure of PACs. As per the School Act, each PAC must have a constitution and bylaws. And within that constitution and bylaws, they need to specify how your meetings are going to run, how the business is going to be conducted, what's to happen if you're going to dissolve your PAC, and how your executives are elected. So looking at your own constitution and bylaws, they should be revised on a yearly basis. It is for some schools, it is a large document, and revise doesn't mean to change it. It just means have a look at it, see if what's in the constitution and bylaws still applies, or if it's outdated, perhaps it's time that you change it. So if you don't have any bylaws, you need to get started to resolve that. And we at Surrey DPAC can certainly help you out with that. If you have not reviewed or updated your bylaws in a long time, now is the time. We also recommend that once you have looked over your bylaw, if it's just on paper, some schools still have it just on paper, to perhaps take the time to type it up and turn it into a PDF or into a Word document that you can then keep in the secretary file, and then you could just be able to make changes later on. So a constitution and bylaws, it is a living document, and it should be well known to all members within your PAC executive, as well as all of your parents in your school. This is very, very important. It is a lot to take in when reading a constitution and bylaws. However, it is very important that everyone knows how to read them, how to interpret them, and how to use them. And the reason I say that is because we get a lot of emails at Surrey DPAC where something has happened in a PAC, and the claim is that the Constitution and bylaws were not followed. That right there is a huge say, because if a PAC is contacting us because the executive is making decisions or taking actions and not following the Constitution and bylaws, it is not a very good thing. And it shouldn't come to that. Executives should know their Constitution and bylaws and should be following it. So If you don't know your constitution and bylaws, you should invest some time in reading it, because you wouldn't want to have a parent who does invest the time and reads it and then holds you accountable for something and says that you didn't follow the constitution and bylaws. So in order to avoid that, please read it. So a purpose of the Constitution and bylaws is to define your reason for being. It's to provide you with a mandate and a purpose. So most of the constitutions that we see out there, they have within their purpose to create a sense of school community. And they do that by hosting events that bring in the parents and the students and the staff, and creates a better relationship for the entire community. But it also should have in your constitution and bylaws the purpose, which is to make recommendations to your school. And please start actually doing that. I know that some of our PACs out there are only focused on fundraising. And while that is a great thing, I just want to point out that only focusing on fundraising allows some of our most vulnerable students to fall through the cracks. And that shouldn't be happening. And we need to address that. And in order to address that, we need to have those discussions that make us feel uncomfortable at times. Going into a PAC meeting isn't about being comfortable and being able to just zoom through everything, all the events that we're planning and hot lunches and popcorn days that we're doing. It shouldn't just be about that. It should be also to provide time for those uncomfortable issues and concerns to be brought forward, and for discussions to happen around how you as a PAC can make recommendations to your school. And if it's a district-wide situation, then those issues can then be brought to our DPAC meetings, at which then we would have a wholesome discussion amongst all of the schools attending the meeting and see if it is something we need to address district-wide, so that then DPAC can make recommendations to the district as well. However, some of these issues won't come to DPAC unless they're already happening at the PAC level. So it is very important to continue to have those hard discussions. Your bylaws within your constitution, they define the roles of your membership and your executives. It provides direction and authority to the membership and to the executive, and it provides a method for holding everyone in the organization accountable for their decisions and their actions. The following should be included in your constitution and bylaws, which is the purpose of a PAC. Advise the school principal and staff on parents' views and feedback about school. Programs, policies, plans, and activities. Organize PAC activities, events to promote school community. Provide parent education on purpose of PAC, DPAC, and BCC PAC. So this one here is a very important one. I know that you are all not going to know what DPAC does, what BCC PAC does. Some are even new to PAC, so they're not even sure what PAC does. Take the time to find out what that means, and then take the time to educate your parents on what it is to be in a PAC, the purpose of DPAC and the purpose of BCC PAC. Encourage parent involvement in the school. Communicate with parents to provide financial support for the goals of the PAC as determined by its membership. To advocate on behalf of parents and students at the school level. To participate in the activities of DPAC by meeting the School Act requirement to elect a DPAC representative. Now this one here we're going to touch base on a little bit, because it's actually in the School Act that a DPAC rep needs to be elected within your PAC. So I know that at DPAC we did make some changes to our own constitution and bylaws for voting purposes only, to accommodate the absence of a DPAC rep. We don't mean the vacancy of a DPAC rep, we mean the absence. So if a DPAC rep is unable to attend a meeting and we are voting on something, then we have changed our voting rules to allow the next person to be able to carry the vote for your PAC. So that would be your president or vice president, secretary and treasurer in that order, and any others that you might list as well. That is only in place as a safeguard, meaning that if your DPAC representative cannot attend our meeting, then we will take the vote from any of those other in attendance. It does not, however, replace the need to elect a DPAC representative. So I know that it's hard to find volunteers at times. And so then what we're suggesting is perhaps that the DPAC role can be attached to another role, so that if someone runs for vice president, perhaps they could be vice president slash DPAC rep, or hot lunch coordinator slash DPAC rep, or member at large slash DPAC rep. DPAC rep needs to be an elected position as per the School Act. In fact, it is the only executive position mentioned in the School Act, aside, like, not even president or treasurer or any of those ones are mentioned in the School Act. DPAC rep is. So please make the changes required on your PAC to be able to elect a DPAC rep moving forward. So let's have a look at some executive positions. So in your constitution and bylaws, you should have a section that lists the positions you wish to have within your PAC and all of their pertaining duties. Having this keeps everyone organized and accountable. You should clearly state the terms, meaning the number of years a volunteer may hold a position for. And this would apply for specifically the leadership roles such as president slash chair and or treasurer. Now having this in your constitution, it ensures an opportunity for change. If you don't put terms in your constitution, then you are providing the opportunity for a volunteer to step into the leadership role of president and continue to be president until they exit the school. That could be a total of 7 years. If they have multiple children, that could turn into 14 years. So it is something to consider. I know that some will take the position and just sort of in a way roll with it because nobody else steps up to it. Having a term in your constitution and bylaws makes it so that that person must exit that role and a new person then has to step in, even if it's to give a break, say for a year, so that then the other person can run again the following year to be back as a president or chair because they're just doing such a fantastic job that you want to keep them on. That's fine, but they need to take a break and they need to take at least a 1 year off, and that would be noted in your constitution and bylaws by setting terms for each position if you want, or at least the president and treasurer positions. The treasurer one, I noted it in there because we did have some PACs that contacted us that had a treasurer who was still in place. Their child had already exited the school and they were still holding the position of treasurer. And so then the PAC was looking for advice on how they could remove that person from there. So that is what I'm referring to as forced in the next sentence. So change happens in a seamless way when it is expected, not when it's forced. Setting terms makes it happen in a seamless way. If I run for president and you're telling me that on my constitution it says I can only be president for 1 year, I know that in 1 year I will be exiting that position. Whereas if there is no terms and I continue to run and not enough parents are able to come to the meeting that would turn the vote in a different way to have me exit the role, then that means that I can continue as many years as I can get volunteers to come into that meeting and vote for me. It's really sad that that's how it works, but that is the reality. And I know that some of our PACs are in situations where they have very poor attendance at their meetings. And because of that poor attendance, those that do attend and are okay with how things are being run will continue to elect the same people over and over and over. However, it might not necessarily be what is agreed upon by the entire membership. There could be other parents out there not happy with how the PAC is being run, and change is not happening because of the lack of parents coming to meetings. So in a way to avoid something like that from continuing, it is best that your constitution and bylaws reflect terms and allow for change, and for that change to happen in a seamless way, for it to be expected already and not for it to be forced at a later time. So looking now at the positions, each position that you're going to see listed is going to have knowing the constitution and bylaws of the PAC. That right there is the most important duty of any position within your PAC. So the chair is also to ensure that the PAC activities are aimed at achieving the objectives and purpose of the PAC, be the official spokesperson for the PAC, runs meetings following parliamentary procedures, oversees the day-to-day operations of your PAC, and stays connected with the principal regarding school needs and activities, and always, always, always consult PAC members regularly. The vice chair, co-chair, or vice president, whichever one applies to your PAC, know the constitution and bylaws again, provide support and assistance to other executive members and committee coordinators as necessary. Be ready to step into chair president role if needed. So you're going to see here that the duties of the executive positions are not going into the, how should I put it, specific details of that position, meaning that if there's events that need to be planned, it's the president who's planning them, that if there are newsletters that need to be written up, that it's the president who's doing it. It's not going into stuff like that. Work, that is what the work is of the PAC. Work should be dispersed evenly, or equally, I should say, amongst the executives. It shouldn't just fall on one person, such as the president. Anybody on your executive can create the newsletter for you all. Anybody on the executive can create the agenda. You just all need to have a conversation as to who is going to do the work, and then assign the bodies to do that. The president is that's all it is. It's just a title, and all that they should be doing is leading by example and creating a sense of unity and keeping the group on track. That's it. They shouldn't be dictating. They shouldn't be making decisions all on their own. They should just be guiding the group as one. And I hope that that's what's happening out there. I know that the emails about dictatorships has come to like slow down, I should say, because we are starting to see the change. But just wanted to remind everybody that that is still happening out there, and if it's happening in your PAC is being run the wrong way, and so that needs to be looked at. So the vice chair, right, steps in where needed. Share that work. Secretary, again, know the constitution, but the secretary does have a few specific duties that they need to do, and that would be to record the minutes of the general, special, and executive meetings, keep an accurate and up-to-date copy of the constitution and bylaws, and have copies available for executive members and general members upon request. Safely file all minutes records of the PAC in the filing cabinet at the school or digital drive. including submitted committee minutes. Make copies of minutes records available to all PAC members upon the request. And again, all PAC members meaning all parents of that school. The treasurer. Know the Constitution and bylaws. Give report of receipts and expenditures at general meetings when requested. Ensure that all funds collected on behalf of the PAC are deposited in an account at a recognized financial institution approved by the PAC. Make books available for viewing by all members upon request. Have the books ready for inspection for audit annually. This one is a very important one because should gaming do an audit for your school, your books should already be in order. You should not be scrambling to put the books in order. They should already be in order. With the assistance of the executive, draft an operating budget and tentative plan of expenditures. So this is your operating budget that you are planning with your executive and your principal that you would then present to your membership, have a wholesome discussion on, and then put to a vote as to for that being your budget for this school year. Again, the budget is also a live document. If something was voted on in the fall and it needs to change at a later time, it can be amended, and it would be done so by putting a motion on the floor to amend the budget. Ensure that all financial books are on school premises unless they are being updated. Now this right here, it is starting to change a little bit. Some of our PACs are starting to move to a digital budget. So the budget is accessible by all executive members. They can all see the changes that are happening on the budget. The only thing that is physical is the receipts. And so then the receipts should be kept at the school. Ensure that another signing officer has access to the books in the event of his or her absence. Now this step right here would be when it comes to the receipts, if you are already digital, because everyone has access to the digital budget on the drive if that's already what your PAC is doing. If they're not doing that and it is a physical book where all of the budgeting is being done with pencil and paper, or pen and paper I should say, then you should have somebody as a backup that knows where these books are or can access these books if need be, should the treasurer take absence for any reason. And then of course some PACs, they have members at large or directors at large, and the same thing would apply to them. Know the Constitution and bylaws, and then of course provide and share the work where needed. Some PACs even have hot lunch coordinators, class reps, and that's great. Like I've heard of other positions where they have parking monitors. And then of course, you know, those duties would be defined in your constitution if you have them in the constitution. Some PACs just have them as a volunteer specific position, meaning that they're not part of the executive, that they're not required to attend the executive meetings. They would just be filling in as the volunteer that organizes, as an example, hot lunches, but they wouldn't be there at the executive meetings to provide information about expenditures or anything like that. All they do is, at least the example I'm using in one of the PACs, is they just coordinate gathering volunteers to show up for the hot lunch, to help for the hot lunch, and that's it. They don't plan what the hot lunch is going to be. They don't send out the notices or count any money. This one hot lunch coordinator is only in charge of the day of hot lunch. So when it comes to duties with other roles that you have created, if it's not within your constitution and bylaws, you should have somewhere where it clearly defines what that role is and what their duties are. And now back to the DPAC representative. This is a very, very important role, and it needs to be filled according to the School Act. So as suggested, it can be filled by somebody else that is already holding a position, or it could be a shared position. And the DPAC rep is responsible for attending DPAC meetings and providing a report to the general membership. It is an important role because it is the arm that connects your PAC to the district. Now, at DPAC, we don't focus on fundraising. That's not our mandate. Ours is more directed towards um, looking at how education is being delivered within our district and making recommendations if needed, and having discussions about things that are happening out there within our PACs. Sometimes we touch on some very, very good topics, and these topics, they do apply to your PAC. If you do not have a DPAC representative at our DPACs, you're missing out on information and missing out on being part of very important discussions. So it is always a good idea to have somebody attend should your DPAC representative not be able to attend our DPAC meetings. An example would be during the pandemic, DPAC decided to advocate to the Ministry of Education on the importance of masks within our schools. We gathered all of this information and feedback from our parents that were contacting DPAC via email, via surveys that we put out there. However, discussions were also held at meetings. We have 120 schools in our district, and we only have approximately 30 to 40 PACs being represented at the DPAC level. That means that 30 or 40 PACs at the district meeting are the ones that are making the decisions that are affecting every single PAC in the school district. And I'm pointing that out because it comes back to, again, right, to those that are in attendance at meetings. At your own school PAC, if you always have the same parents attending and no other parents are coming in, the PAC will continue to run according to those in attendance. Same thing happens at DPAC. Masks, I know, was a big issue when it came to a lot of parents, and we were divided in some areas. However, the majority in attendance stated that masks needed to be in schools, and so that's the position that DPAC took. Should that have been different? Maybe that would have been different if the attendance would have been higher. So we at DPAC are also working hard to try and encourage more engagement within our DPAC meetings, and vice versa. We're also encouraging our PACs to please take that back with your PACs and do your very best to encourage more involvement within your parents. Holding your elections. Now, in your constitution and bylaws, it should state how elections are to happen when it comes to providing notice to your membership, how you're going to provide that notice by either posting it, and how it is that you're going to vote. Some PACs, they put out a call or nominations. In the end, though, I've noticed that in the Constitution and bylaws, it doesn't state that there is a deadline to submit nominations, which then means that nominations can be taken at the meeting or on the floor, as you would say, the day of the meeting. If that's the case, then that's fine. For PACs, it's an even smaller community, so everybody knows who everybody is. So that's not such a big problem. For DPAC, we have been revising our constitution and bylaws because we don't know who these parents are from 120 different schools, and it can be harder for us to recognize if that parent does belong to a school here in Surrey. So we're looking at changing our bylaws and constitutions to reflect a method of us being able to identify this parent belonging to the Surrey School District. At your PAC level, however, it gets a little bit more simpler when it comes to elections. The best way to handle your elections, of course, is always to provide enough ample time for all parents to be able to think about running for that position. So that would be a call out for nominations. And in your constitution and bylaws, it should also state how many days you are to provide notice that there are elections coming up. And of course, the eligibility will depend on what your constitution and bylaws state. So if you have run for president and your bylaws state you can only run for 1 year, or the term is 1 year, that means that for the upcoming elections, you would not be able to put your name again for president. Maybe you could put it in for treasurer, DPAC rep, vice president. Unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to run for president again. That right there is going to provide the possibility for change in roles. During the AGM, you should be doing a last call for nominations, unless of course it's stated differently in your constitution. And then how parents are voted on should also be included in your constitution and bylaws. If it's not mentioned, then you would make that clear at the beginning of the meeting, saying, today we're going to be voting on our positions by show of hands, unless somebody else would like to have it as a ballot. And if that's the case, valid. And if that's the case, then you would need to put a motion on the floor to request that everybody be elected through ballot, and then you would then provide that for everybody to fill in the names of who it is that you're voting for. And then, of course, once the names are counted, someone would need to motion at the meeting that the ballots be destroyed. Okay, into the PAC meetings. So as mentioned above, a PAC meeting is run by the chair or president. However, a PAC meeting can be run by any other executive, or if in your constitution and bylaws you wish to have a line that also states, should the executive not be available, after a certain amount of time of the meeting starting, then the members present can assign someone in the group of those that are present to run that meeting. So again, that would need to be clearly defined in your constitution and bylaws, but normally it is usually the president or vice president, and if the president can't be available, then they have already made arrangements for either their treasurer or vice president or secretary to run the meeting for them. Your bylaws should also state the amount of notice that you provide to your parents when calling a meeting, so that it could be either 14 days, 30 days, and how that notice will be delivered, either website, Facebook, email, or posted on the PAC board. Now, the steps that I'm including right now, this would be done, I would say, at your first executive meeting. So you would plan your first executive meeting with your newly elected executive. And then you would go through all of these steps in preparation for your first general meeting with all of your parents. So with your executive, you would plan to get organized. Look at how your meetings will run moving forward, how you're going to put notice for your meetings. Are you going to look at the entire calendar and plan the calendar for the whole year? How your budget is going to look like? If you're just rolling the budget from last year over to this year, if that's what needs to happen because there are no changes and you like how the budget was for last year, that's great. If you have new ideas, you would present the new ideas and have a discussion on the ideas, and always keep it realistic. Don't put ideas out there unless you're ready to also take charge for those ideas, because ideas are great, but if there isn't anybody to actually execute them, it doesn't look very well. So ideas shouldn't be mentioned unless you already have someone that is stepping up, ready to take charge of those ideas and making them actually happen. So you should provide a budget report at all meetings and assign a delegate again to fill in should your treasurer be absent. So always have that second person right at the beginning of the year. If you have two people, one there just in case the treasurer is absent is great preparation. Provide parents with an admin report. So have a discussion about always having the principal or a vice principal present at your general meetings, at least at your general meetings, so that they can provide an administration report on the ongoings of your school to all of your parents. This one is a very, very important one, because that way you hear about things that are coming down the pipe to the schools, changes that are taking effect and will be affecting your children. Plan your meeting dates. So set dates well in advance and post at the beginning of the year. This is recommended now to sort of establish a routine so that parents are always in the know. At Surrey DPAC, we all know that our meetings happen on the fourth Wednesday at the end of the month. That's just a known. It's been happening since we started. That's our routine. So we never run into the situation where parents miss our meetings because our meeting date was, is always fluctuating. We never run into that situation. We just run into situations where parents can't attend for other obligations, but not because our dates are all over the place. So that's a good routine to start doing, and then it helps parents plan for the whole year. Setting meeting dates in advance also helps you meet the terms of your bylaws of providing ample notice to parents, right? So, we've had some emails where parents are reaching out to us because they're saying that the PAC executive is not providing enough time of when meetings are being held, and parents are not able to make arrangements to either stay home from work or find babysitters for their children, and so that they're not able to attend. However, if you set all of your dates well in advance for the whole school year, parents are not going to be able to run into that situation, right? And so it's going to avoid that right there. Plan your agendas. So having an agenda is very important because it keeps your meeting organized and on time. And if it can be done, provide your agenda well ahead of your meetings. However, keep in mind that an agenda is a living document or a live document, and so it can change up until the agenda is approved for that meeting. So we are all volunteers. Some of us even work full-time jobs. I remember that when I started volunteering at Bear Creek Elementary in 2011, I was working 3 jobs. And I still volunteered. I still gave up my time. I gotta admit, I could never find the time to create the agenda in time. So, however, it was brought to my attention that some parents, especially when you're going to be discussing a hot topic, one of them, out there is having a presenter like Salima Noon. My apologies if I said the name wrong. That is a very, very important topic to some parents. So then I decided that instead of actually creating the agenda itself, line per line per line, how you present at a meeting, that what I was going to start to do is in the reminder leading up to the meetings, posting just a quick overview of topics to be discussed at the meeting. And that then provided the opportunity for parents to know that, yes, we are going to be looking at presenters at our upcoming meeting. Presenters being taken into consideration are Selena Noom and White Hatter, as an example. That right there sets the precedence for the parents, right? It says, these are the 2 presenters. I don't want either one of these presenters at our school, or I want to know more information about these presenters and what they're about. So then I, as a parent, would make arrangements so that I can make it to that next meeting. So it's not the agenda line by line by line, but it is providing an overview of the topics that are going to be discussed at the meeting. And again, your meetings, your agenda is a live document. So even if you were to send your full agenda, line per line per line, step by step in your agenda, well ahead of time, that agenda can change at the beginning of the meeting, because part of your meeting is to approve the agenda as presented. Should a parent be there and add an item to the agenda and you have more than enough time to discuss it that night, you could be having that Selena Noom discussion that night without ever having the opportunity to tell other parents that the discussion was happening. However, That will, of course, we'll look at the parliamentary procedures as to how that could happen and why that would happen, and the fact that that is actually allowed as we go over to the next slides. But coming back to this, planning your agenda, it is recommended. If you can't plan it, at least include an overview of the topics to be discussed, just to give your parents a highlight of what it is that they are to expect at your next meeting. And then, of course, plan to run your meetings in a fair and respectful manner by following the parliamentary procedures. Always, always, always do that, to plan to run your meetings in a fair and respectable manner. We all have a right to speak. We do not have to agree with each other, but the opportunity to be heard must be presented. And if the opportunity to be heard is not being presented, then I gotta tell you, your PAC is not running as it should. It's not running in a democratic way, and that needs to be corrected. Okay, so let's look at parliamentary procedures. So parliamentary procedure is meant to achieve fairness for all. It is used to facilitate action, not obstruct it, to enable the assembly to express its will, to give every member a fair hearing, and it is also there to maintain order. Parliamentary procedure is based on the following principles: justice and courtesy for all, equality of opinion, rule of the majority. This is based on the democratic process. However, it is also to provide the right of the minority to be heard. And of course, to do only one thing at a time. Rules of order are designed to include all members in decision making, with everyone having a fair and equal opportunity to participate and influence the group's decisions. Think of parliamentary procedure as table manners. A certain amount is needed for an orderly meal. Many organizations' bylaws say that Robert's Rules of Order apply if the bylaws are silent on an issue. Robert's rules are often more complex than you need, and you may use any procedure your council agrees on. Think fair, reasonable, and responsible. So, what does all of this mean? Well, it means that parliamentary procedures exist to be able to provide the opportunity for any parent at your PAC meeting to speak. You may not like what they're saying. You may not agree with what they're saying. However, you as a PAC executive have the responsibility to provide the opportunity for that parent to speak. Now, Robert's rules and the parliamentary procedures have specific ways of controlling the conversation. And by that I mean keeping it on track, not letting it divert to other areas that are not even part of the discussion, or letting it go way beyond the time that is allotted. So a good practice is at the start of your meetings, especially when you know you're going to be having a topic on the floor that might not be agreeable by all, you should start your meeting with some housekeeping rules: to be respectful, to be mindful of everyone's time, to respect the meeting time. Maybe even set a time frame for speakers. An example would be that you tell all of your parents, we will be discussing this topic today. If you want to speak for the topic, that you are in favor of it, you will be provided with 3 minutes per speaker to speak. If you wish to speak against it, the same rule applies to you. You will be given 3 minutes to speak against the topic. If you have already spoken once, you may not speak again on the same topic. And this is very, very, needs to be very clear. And the reason for it is because the opportunity to speak has been provided, but it shouldn't be taken advantage of for you to continue to put pressure and be forceful with what it is that you are trying to speak on. So you can speak against it, you can say your piece, and then that's it. And then, of course, there's other rules that come into play. We have these posted on our website. An example would be that you have 10 people for and 15 people against it. You need to set a limit so that your meeting stays on time. So you could look at how many people wish to speak for it and how many against it. You would have to be fair and do an equal amount from each sides, but set a limit. You could say, you know what, looking at our time to keep us on track, we're going to hear from 3 for and 3 against. Each of you have 3 minutes to speak. Once we are done with these 6 people talking about these, speaking on the topic, we will then move to the vote, if there is to be a vote. And now, going into the voting process, and I know that this is quite a lot to take in, moving into the voting process. So the topic is on the floor, the discussion is being had. Let's say that that topic was added to the agenda the day of, okay? Should there be a parent in the room that does not agree with this discussion going to a vote? So it's fine that you have the discussion, but they don't feel that it should be voted on today because it was added to the agenda today, and they feel that other parents would want to be part of the voting process. This you need to hear very clearly. Someone, anyone, any parent in the room needs to put a motion on the floor to stop the vote from happening. So you would say that by asking for the floor to speak. Once you're granted, you would say, I would like to put a motion forward. I motion that this topic be delayed and added instead for voting at our next general meeting to provide ample time for others who are not in attendance today to become aware of this topic and the fact that it will be voted on. Okay? Now, unfortunately, here's the sad part. Your motion must be seconded. The other parents do not have to agree with your motion, but if they feel that maybe your motion needs to be heard, that it needs to be put to discussion, another person would need to second it. Okay, so maybe have conversations with your PAC to explain this process to them, that seconding a motion does not mean you have to agree with it. It's just providing the opportunity for that person's motion to be put on the floor for discussion. So, 2 things are happening here. 1, there's a discussion about a hot topic that most likely will go to a vote that same night. 2, an interruption has been made to put a motion to suspend the vote. The motion that is on the floor right now, if it does get seconded, is to suspend the vote, and you must now put the other conversation on hold and focus on the motion on the floor. So now we're looking at suspending the vote. Okay, it was seconded. All right, let's have a discussion about it. Does everybody think that it's fair that we should suspend it? Do you not think that it's fair that it should be suspended? You're following the same process again. Speaking for, speaking against. Okay, we've had a discussion. Let's put it to a vote. Who votes that we should suspend the vote? And then you would take a vote. If the majority rules that you should suspend it, it passes, the vote will be suspended until the next meeting. If the vote fails, the vote is happening tonight, and it is a fair vote. I know we get a lot of emails saying that something was discussed at a meeting, it was voted on at a meeting, that it wasn't fair because it wasn't sent out in time, but there's different rules that apply here, and they're all following under the parliamentary procedure, and they are all fair. It's just that the understanding of how these rules work is not quite there. And that's why it's very, very important for you as a PAC executive to educate your parents on how a PAC runs. Same way that this is how DPAC also runs. And you should definitely take the time and experience what BCC PAC is all about, because you will see it in a room full of 300 people going through the same parliamentary procedures that I just explained to you. Okay? So then let's say that the vote passes. You're not going to have the vote at the next meeting. We'll go that way. So then you would go back to your discussion. Okay, we have heard from 5 people for the 2 and 5 from the no. Everybody, we've provided the opportunity for discussion. We're going to close the discussion today on this topic. This topic has now been moved to the next general meeting for a vote. Okay, at the next general meeting, you would have another quick discussion and you would make it even more brief, and then you would put the discussion for a vote. Okay, so hopefully you're following me through here. I hope that I have touched on a few examples of what can and cannot happen, and then we'll move on to the next one. During your meeting, steps to take during your meeting. So this is the agenda. Now we're going to have a sample agenda on the website. However, an agenda is just something to keep you on track. You could just have it, with your date, your school name, and then just from start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in steps of how you're going to run your meeting. So you call your meeting to order, and in brackets I put making sure quorum has been met as per your bylaws. So in your bylaws under meetings, you should have what your quorum is. Some PACs have it, members present are quorum. Great, 3 people are present, you're meeting quorum. 2 people are present, you are meeting quorum, and you're having a meeting. And if you need to vote on something, you can. You met quorum. So if that doesn't sound right to you, please have a look at your constitution and bylaws and perhaps maybe think about changing your quorum. Number 2, approve your past minutes, if any. And I put if any because perhaps your past minutes, you're brand new PAC and you don't have minutes. If this is an agenda for a committee and you never met before, you don't have any. So that's why I put that on there. And then of course underneath, secretary to ensure minutes are recorded and provided for all meetings. So just making a note that the secretary would be recording this meeting. So then you would move on to approve your agenda. This is the part where I was mentioning earlier. This is the time when parents are provided with the opportunity to modify the agenda. This is done by following the procedures to put forward a motion, which we will look at in a moment, and then parents, meaning the memberships present, vote to add item to the agenda. So you would say, okay, we're going to approve the agenda, motion to approve the agenda. It has to be seconded. You all should also be, before motioning to approve the agenda, be asking if there are any amendments to the agenda. Okay, if you're skipping that, then you're unfortunately doing it wrong. So you need to say, here is the agenda, it's being presented to you. Does anybody have anything to add to the agenda or modify to the agenda? Seeing none, motion to approve the agenda. Now, some PACs, they do it like that. They motion and then they second it and then they approve it. The other way you can go around it is just to adopt it. So then you could say, the agenda is being presented to you. Are there any amendments or changes to the agenda? You give a long pause. No, there isn't any. Okay, seeing none, the agenda is adopted as presented. And you skip out the seconder and the actual vote to approve the agenda. Okay, this is done to specific steps that are always the same. And it is as per Robert's rule. I believe it's page 236, but I could be wrong. I'll double check that. And it is something that we are educating our parents on at the DPAC meetings. So I'm sure you've heard me mention it before. So if the agenda is good, it's adopted, great, you're moving forward, and then you start your meeting with your first item, and then keep the agenda moving with your allotted meeting time. So the chair's responsibility is to run the meetings. It is not to say, I'm sorry, we're not adding that to the agenda. It is not to say, yeah, we're just not going to bother discussing that today. It is to run the meeting, meaning start it on time, stay on track, end it on time. The meeting belongs to your members. Okay, so I just want to make that very clear. I know I sound very firm. My apologies if I sound rude. I'm just trying to make sure that it's done in a fair process and that everybody understands that your responsibility is very different than from what we have been understanding it to be these, for a long time. The message has lost its way somewhere. So we're just trying to bring it back on track. So if your members have added items to the agenda, you'll be discussing those items, but also keeping in mind the amount of time allotted for your meetings. So if you normally run for 2 hours, keep that in mind. If a parent adds an item to the agenda, right, if they motion to add something to the agenda, in the discussion part of that motion, you could, as a chair, say, looking at our agenda today and seeing that our agenda is jam-packed, could we please add this to the next meeting, right? Could we maybe put this and allot specific time for this discussion to definitely be dived into with a lot more time at our next meeting? That would be your way to go around that. Not saying, nope, we're not discussing that. Because you don't want to be controversial. You want to be proactive in a way to provide that opportunity for that parent to be heard. And that would be your way of doing that. So providing a different solution to what's happening. Or say, you know what? It looks like this is a very important topic. It looks like we should address it today. Perhaps we should take some other stuff out that can wait until the next meeting and modify the agenda, right? To make time today. And then you would continue with your agenda, starting with your first step and keeping track of the time. As you're going through the agenda, please take the time to go over each item with as much detail as possible to ensure that all parents understand what is being discussed, and provide time to hear from those that wish to speak on the matter before moving on to the next item. So let's say that we're discussing hot lunches. We've already picked out all the dates. We already picked out what we're selling. But then a parent says that they wish to have more questions about hot lunch. Take the time to have the discussion with that parent to clarify things before moving on to the next topic. Be respectful and answer questions from your membership. Your responsibility as a PAC executive is to provide information to your parents, to be accountable to your parents. And so you cannot continue on with the meeting unless you have provided clarification to that parent. It is imperative that time be provided for discussion should a matter require a vote. Time must be provided to hear from both sides, those for the topic and those against the topic, as per parliamentary rules. Should a vote be necessary, follow your voting steps as outlined in your constitution, but normally this is done by show of hands. Okay, and then your final steps on your agenda would be the open discussion and end time. Open discussion is something that we've been encouraging all PACs to have, okay? Because sometimes parents arrive late for whatever the reason may be, but they arrived late and they missed the opportunity to add something to the agenda. You could start the open discussion part of it by saying, we have 10 minutes left. Is there anything in the open discussions that anybody would like to discuss right now? We have 10 minutes left. Or if you're well, in time and you have half an hour or an hour, all of those would determine on what the topic being brought forward is, right? But always keep reminding your membership of the time. Have them be mindful of it as well. That way they know that they have 10 minutes to voice whatever it is, and then if steps need to be taken to provide more time at the next meeting, then a motion will be put to the floor to do so. Okay, so always provide an open discussion time in your agenda. This ensures that an opportunity is provided for those that wish to put forward a topic. Should a topic be brought forward that requires more time for discussion, a motion can be put forward by any parent in attendance that the topic be moved for discussion at the next meeting. this would be added to your next meeting agenda. So an example would be you have 10 minutes, a parent brings up a discussion, you start to discuss it. As the discussion continues, you notice that the discussion is getting somewhat heated or very engaged, and it's just taking a lot of time. Any parent, right? Any parent can then say motion to end the meeting or motion to move this topic to the next meeting. And then you would quickly vote on that and then put it to the next meeting. You would close discussion, and then that way you can end your meeting on time. Okay. Should the discussion get out of hand that control needs to be taken, any parent can also call the meeting. If the meeting is called, so here's a really weird step that you guys are going to be like, what? If the meeting is called, or the question is called, I should say, you must go back to your agenda and keep going as per your agenda, meaning discussion on that topic has to end, and then you would go to end your meeting. Unfortunately, that means that no opportunity to motion that that topic be added to the next agenda is put in place. So then that parent or you as the chair would make the decision when putting together the next agenda to either add that topic on there, or the parent would then have to contact the PAC to add that item to the agenda, or again go through the process of amending the agenda at the beginning of the meeting at the next meeting. So a motion to put it on the next meeting makes it that it's going to happen, a for sure thing. If that motion is not put in before someone calls the meeting, it has to be done through the other avenues of adding it to the agenda. By amending the agenda, by sending an email to the PAC in advance to add it to the agenda, or you as the chair make the decision saying, wow, that topic, it needed to be discussed and we should continue the conversation, and then just add it to the next agenda. Okay, so those are your three options should the meeting be called. And again, those are Robert's Rules of Order and are found on our website. So the question is asked whether a vote can be overturned. We get these a lot. The answer is yes. However, there are steps that must be taken in order to get the topic back on the table. PAC meetings should be about the overview. For example, a PAC general meeting can discuss if and when a PAC barbecue will happen. They discuss and vote on the amount to spend and approve the budget for that event. The actual planning and organizing of the event belongs to the volunteer in charge of that event. What brand of hot dogs to use, or if a concession will be available with other items, or if it's just hot dogs, those decisions are left up to the volunteer in charge. Should parents feel that they need to be part of those decisions, then they should volunteer to help with those events. It's as simple as that. The reason I put that on there is because we get a lot of emails asking us about decisions that are being made at the planning stages of an event. Planning is done by the volunteer who has agreed to lead that event, to take charge of that event. You can't expect, as a parent in your school, you can't expect above and beyond what that volunteer is capable of, or show up at a general meeting asking that certain things be done at an event without taking into consideration that volunteer's time and the manpower that is in planning that event. So you can't ask for a full concession at the year-end sports day. So that's saying in there, yeah, I motion that the PAC put on a full concession at the sports day event at the end of the year. You can't do that. It's not realistic without taking into consideration other things that the PAC executive has going on, without taking into consideration the fact that you need a volunteer to run that event plan that event, shop for that event, organize that event the day of, take down the event the day of, count the money if there was any money, do the deposit, clean up everything that is left over, picking up all of that garbage. You need to take all of that into consideration when you're putting your brilliant ideas forward. Who is actually doing the work? And so that's why I put that in there. Planning an event the decisions, they fall on the volunteer that is in charge of that event. You can't expect a lot from that volunteer unless you are willing to be there with them saying, I'm joining you in planning this event. What are we doing? How can we do it? How can I help? What do you need from me? Then it's different. Then you can bring your ideas. Oh, we should do this because guess what? I'm the one that's going to go shopping for it. I'm the one that's going to organize it. And I'm the one that's going to put it in there. Right? So let's be realistic with and mindful of our volunteers and their time. Yes, they stepped up to an executive position, but they didn't step up to an executive position to do what you want them to do for little things like that. They stepped up into the executive position to organize the PAC, to be able to have wholesome discussions about education in our schools, to make recommendations to the principal, and to, if able to, create events that promote community within your school. So if they're not able to do it, you should not be coming at them, asking them why they can't. The volunteers are just not able to do it, and you should accept that or step up and do it. Okay, so let's move on. Motions. Okay, so motions. A motion is a proposal to take action. It is the main way business is brought before a meeting. It allows a member to bring up an issue or point of business, and it requires the group to focus. It is improper to discuss anything else while a motion is on the floor. So as I was mentioning before, you are having a discussion, you put a motion to suspend the vote, you must focus on the suspension of the vote motion before you can go back to your discussion. So when is a motion required? Anytime your council wants to do something, the action should be approved by motion. If the council wants to change the course of something already underway, the change should be sanctioned by a motion. And if your council wants to spend money, the expenditure must be approved by motion. Now, normally what we all do is we present the budget, we have discussions about the budget, we amend the budget as per our discussion. Once the budget has been amended, we then motion to approve the budget as presented, and it's all lines within that budget because the discussion has already been had. So, however, moving forward, because the budget again is a live document, should we need to amend the budget, a specific line in the budget as an example, we're now forecasting that fun night is not going to cost us $3,000, it's not going to cost us $10,000. That's a big discussion to have. Now we're going to bring it back to the table. Okay, so the motion on the floor is to amend the budget line fun night from 3,000 to 10,000. You open up the floor, you have the discussion about it. If it passes, you change it to 10,000. If it fails, you leave it at 3,000. And unfortunately, those planning fun night are going to have to go back and say, well, that's it. They're saying it's 3,000. We must keep it under 3,000, or guess what? We would need to cancel the event, right? So that is how motions work. So there are many kinds of motions. Remember two things. Motions move your group forward. They give you the go-ahead to take action. And motions allow for debate and consideration of all sides of an issue. Because motions require the group to focus on one issue at a time, disagreement can be resolved by motion. Okay, so that's something to then keep in mind. Since motion then are what provide the go-ahead for action, there's also times when a motion is unnecessary, and then there is a time frame for the motions that you put forward. So for example, in approving agendas, minutes, or treasurer's report, the chair can simply ask, are there any additions or corrections to the agenda or the minutes or the treasurer's report? And then pause, allow time for anybody to speak up in case there is any corrections that are needed to be applied. And then seeing none, the chair or president would then say, seeing none, the minutes or agenda or treasurer's report is adopted as presented. So this can be done with any routine item that you would do every time that you host a general meeting or executive meeting for that matter. When it comes to a time frame of a motion, when you put forward a motion, you just can't do it for a motion that is going to go beyond the year for which you are holding the executive position. So an example would be a motion to hold a parent conference or a fun night every year for the next 5 years. People and priorities change. Your council's decisions must be capable of being carried out within the term of your current executive. Nothing is stopping you, of course, from putting that motion forward to have a fun night every year for the next 5 years. You can do that if you want. However, when the new executive comes in next year, they can have a meeting and they can then vote to overturn that motion so that they don't have to carry it on for the next 4 years. So there's ways of correcting things that have been put in place that are then continued on without any question or debate because it was already voted on. Votes can be overturned. There's just a process to follow. And as I mentioned earlier, it is all done by putting the motion back onto the floor, opening it up for discussion, having it seconded, right? If it doesn't get seconded, it doesn't make it for discussion. If it does make it for discussion and then it gets voted, it can still be voted down. So there are still processes that will bring that matter back to the table. It just depends on the outcome of either the discussion or the vote or the seconding of the motion, whether that topic will be discussed or whether it will be voted to be overturned or not. Okay, so we're going to watch a video on the next slide, and it all has to do with motions. I recommend that when you have some spare time to go back to our YouTube channel and to look up just the motion video. The more you watch it, the more it's going to stick in your mind so that way it'll become routine for you to be able to put forward a motion. It'll also get you used to the wording and build a little bit of confidence in being able to put forward motions when it comes to your PAC meetings or when you attend our DPAC meetings, and especially if you decide to participate at the BCC PAC level, which at that level you need to know how to put motions forward to be able to step up to the mics and speak when they're having their meetings. So again, I would encourage you, you have gaming funds that cover BCC PAC expenditures. I would really encourage you to pay that fee and become a member of BCC PAC and to attend at least one AGM for the experience so that you can see how much bigger that work that they do is and how daunting in a way that meeting could look. But it will help you break that ice and then get more comfortable attending those meetings. So it is a bit of an encouragement there. It's not to discourage you. It is an experience, one that I still remember being there at the first one and just being in awe as to how motions are put forward and how the membership votes. And through that is how I learned how to be much better at doing what I do at the DPAC level. So I would definitely encourage that for everybody. Okay, so we're going to start the video. If the video doesn't work, just know that it is available on our YouTube channel as a standalone video. So you can just go to our YouTube channel to find this video on motions.
A motion is a proposal for action by a board of directors. Motions are the way a board makes decisions and gives direction. The board decides what it will do with each motion presented during a meeting. How a board handles motions is at the heart of efficient and effective decision-making. A skilled chair will follow some form of parliamentary procedure to manage decision-making. The most commonly used is Robert's Rules of Order. Some association bylaws require boards follow Robert's Rules of Order. It's up to the chair to protect the rights of each attendee to speak, make motions, advocate a position, and vote. There are 6 main steps in handling a motion. 1. A member makes a motion. 2. Another member seconds the motion. 3. The chair states the motion. 4. The chair opens the motion for discussion. 5. The chair puts the motion to a vote. And 6. The chair announces the outcome. Motions are most often prepared and included on the agenda for a board of directors meeting. If a motion is formulated at the board meeting, it's important to give individuals time to prepare the proper wording. A motion begins when a board member says, "I move," and then states the motion. Motions should always be specific, so there is no uncertainty on what is being decided. Once a motion is made, it should not be discussed by the board until it is seconded. A second does not mean the seconder agrees with the motion, but that he or she believes the motion is worthy of consideration. A director can second a motion simply by saying, "I second the motion," without having to obtain the floor. If no one feels that the motion is worthy of discussion, it does not have to be seconded. In this case, the chair would say the motion dies for lack of a seconder. It may seem awkward if nobody supports the motion, but to respect everyone's time, the chair will move on to other business. After a motion is seconded, the chair states the motion to ensure that everyone is clear on what's being discussed. The chair then opens the motion for discussion. It's the chair's responsibility to ensure all comments are made through the chair and that debate is controlled to ensure fairness, balance, and efficiency. Once the chair feels that there has been sufficient discussion regarding the motion, he or she will call for the vote. There are different ways to vote, but the most common is by a show of hands. Votes by secret ballot are rare at board meetings, but may be used in areas of confidentiality or sensitive matters. Once the vote is taken, the chair announces the result of the vote. There you have it, the 6 steps in handling motions. The proper handling of motions helps boards accomplish their objectives in the most efficient and fair manner.
Madam President, the Board of Directors has directed the committee to identify ways to improve financial reporting. You'll find a copy of that report in your director's meeting package. On behalf of the Finance Committee, it is moved that the Association purchase Working Books accounting information systems to integrate all accounting functions at a cost not to exceed $10,000.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion? Marco, seconds the motion. Thank you. As your chair, I will repeat the motion that the association purchase Working Books accounting information system to integrate all accounting functions at a cost not to exceed $10,000. Frank, would you like to speak to your committee's motion?
Well, I think that all the relevant information is in the report. However, I will say that we're very confident that Working Books will meet all of the association's accounting needs.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the motion? The chair recognizes Betty.
I speak in favor of the motion, but through you, Madam President, I have one question of Frank.
Please go ahead.
How many accounting software companies were canvassed for quotes?
Staff contacted 7 companies. I'd like to point out that all the information was provided to everyone in the material sent out in advance. We assessed each company's system based on predetermined criteria, and Working Books was clearly the strongest candidate.
Is there any other discussion? Frank, since you've already spoken and Marco and Michelle have their hand up, we'll hear from them first. Marco, the chair recognizes you.
Madam President, I do support this motion, but my question is, Can the association assume that the accounting system will continue to be upgraded without any additional costs?
Well, the contract currently has a 2-year upgrade, and after that, we would renegotiate.
Thank you.
Michelle, did you want to?
It's okay.
All right, so 3 members have spoken in favor of the motion. Is there anyone who would like to speak against the motion? Are you ready to vote? Okay. As your chair, I'll read the motion that the association purchase Working Books Accounting Information System to integrate all accounting functions at a cost not to exceed $10,000. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. The motion is carried.
I'm going to talk a little bit about organizing your PAC. Over the course of, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 years now, we've been promoting this at the DPAC level, and that is encouraging our PACs to have one generic email, such as Gmail. And then that Gmail, you should be providing the password to all of your executives. That way they all have access to the ongoings communications that are coming through, and it keeps everybody on the same page. You should just have one person that is designated to answer the emails, and then for example at DPAC we have anything related to do with finance, our treasurer will answer, and all other generic emails I usually answer them. So that kind of keeps it a little bit organized. The other thing too is that with Gmail you have a Google Drive, and then all of your files can be put into the Google Drive and kept under one space, which are accessible by all. So important documents to keep in there would be, for example, the PDF of your Constitution and bylaws, as well as the Word document of your Constitution and bylaws, because remember, it is recommended to review it and amend it every year. Well, you don't have to amend it every year, but at least revise it every year. And then should you need to make an amendment, you would have your Word document that is available so that you can type and delete and type in the new areas. Policy manuals, if you have any. An example would be some PACs have a Facebook policy in place as to what can be put on their group, what type of information can be shared, how to handle comments, all of that sort of stuff. And then of course your agendas and your minutes within your Google Drive. It works just like your drive on your computer, where you set up folders. So you could have, for example, a treasurer folder, a secretary folder, and then a separate folder for your agendas and your minutes. And then within those folders, you can create subfolders for each year, and then have all of those records filed in an organized way. You would also keep your online budget if you already created one. We do have a template available online, or you can email us and request a template for the budget online. That way that budget is being updated. Everybody sees the numbers as they're being updated. The only thing that you would be having a hard copy of is the receipts. And of course the checking book. So that would be the hard copy to do with budgeting. We also recommend that you keep, for example, a folder that is dedicated to your newsletters, event flyers that you've done in the past. As we know, most of our events, they just repeat year after year with small modifications in the dates, or maybe things that we're now offering this year but we didn't offer last year. So it's just easy if the flyers and newsletters are kept and they're just recycled the next year. It also provides a starting point for a brand new executive. If they come in and nobody knows how to do things, they can just look back at the files and then have an idea as to how to proceed for the current year. So having the Google Drive and having everything online, it makes it easier for your team to be able to access it, for parents to be able to do the work at home and then just save the file, and there it is, ready for everybody. There is less waste of paper as well, and it makes it easy to be able to share things. So if a parent asks for a constitution and bylaw, you would just send them an email with a PDF to it instead of printing it out, as a constitution and bylaws can have multiple pages. So in order to save a little bit of paper, it is easier to then just send them a digital copy. So then you'll notice on our website we have organized our folders. When you go to look at the minutes and agendas, it does take you directly to our Google Drive, and through there you can see how our folders are based on year, then on by month, and then soon we'll be introducing more folders that are going to be accessible, having to do with PAC governance and treasury files. So that's coming as well for us. But just organizing your PAC is a good thing to do. It keeps things nice and tidy. It allows people to find documents that they're looking for if they're filed in the correct folders. And it just makes it a little bit more simpler if everything is digital. If someone's working on a flyer and they work it on their personal laptop and they don't do it on the Google Drive, and that person then doesn't come, for whatever reason, for the next couple of weeks back to the school, you're going to have a hard time trying to get a hold of this person, for the flyer that since they were working on. Whereas in the Google Drive, you can see whether it's done or not. And if it's not done, someone else could take the initiative to finalize that document. So there's specific reasons why we encourage it, based on history, things that have happened at other PACs. And we found that moving everything to a digital drive accessible by all executives has proven to be the best option. And as I said, it also keeps threads, very important threads, in that email. If you encourage everybody to write the emails from that general email, and any responses would come back to that email. That one right there is also very important when you have some of your executives sourcing vendors or sourcing companies that are providing gifts. For example, we had a parent who went out at one of the schools and sourced out gift cards as a donation for one of the events that we were hosting. The gift cards were provided, but the PAC never saw the conversations, so the PAC actually never saw the gift cards. Having everybody use a generic email and starting the conversation on that email and not using personal emails will keep important conversations like that in one place and accessible by all, so that everybody can see which vendor has replied and said that they will provide a gift, and then that way the entire executive can expect that gift. It also helps with keeping track of your money. So if there is a vendor that you're contacting and there's a specific amount that was worked out between that executive and the vendor, the entire PAC is aware because the thread is in the email. So then all of that conversation can be traced back to amounts that were agreed upon, what the check was actually written for, how it was that paid. So if the executive decides that they're going to pay the vendor the amount via e-transfer out of their own account, then you would have that thread that, yes, the amount is actually due to the executive and not to the vendor directly. So it helps out PACs stay organized, be transparent, and be accountable to its members by doing it this way. So it has proven to work. We've tested it out at various schools, and we've heard that having a generic email with a Google Drive does help in organizing your PAC. So that is a recommendation for every PAC out there. PAC Finance 101. Over the next couple of slides, we're going to be going over some financial guidelines that are beneficial for your PAC executive to keep in mind. And just so that you are aware, any member of your PAC, any parent, so that makes up your membership, any parent of your PAC can ask to see your financial records. So they can ask to see the book that contains receipts, that contains the checks, Everything to do with your accounting, they can look at. So I'm not saying that they can come up to you and ask you to see what it is that you spent on last month and you give them a summary, which is not a bad idea. However, should that parent say, no, I actually want to look at the books where you keep the receipts, and I want to look at the bank statements, and I want to look at the checkbook, you are responsible for providing that information to that parent. The financial books do not belong to the executive or the treasurer. The financial books belong to the PAC, the organization, and the organization belongs to the parents or members of that school. So it is your responsibility to turn over those books to that parent, not to give it to them so that they can take it home, but at least to provide them an opportunity to sit down with you, the treasurer, and go over the books and then answer any questions that they might have. That is responsible accounting with full transparency within your PAC.
A lot of what I'm going to go through here is it falls back on a lot of the procedures that gaming has in place, and you want to make sure your finances that are taking place at the PAC level coincide a lot with the gaming funds that you're getting, because there's procedures there that have to be followed as well. The only time that procedures do not have to be followed by gaming is when you're doing fundraising and you've raised money outside of gaming funds, then those funds would go into your administrative account, and you would do with those as you would without the rules of gaming. Okay, so I'm just gonna start by saying that you definitely want to, when you have your accounts for your PAC, most PACs, especially at the elementary school level, will usually have two accounts. One is an administrative account, and one is you have to have a separate gaming account. And on each of the account names, you have to say your school name, and followed by either a general account and then followed by, if you're doing the second account, as a gaming account. If you're printing checks, that has to also be on the checks as well. A lot of individuals in the last year have been doing e-transfers, which are allowed, but you got to make sure that if you are you're paying out of your gaming funds, for example, those expenses are eligible expenses with your gaming funds. Okay, so it's really important to make sure that you are not paying for things out of gaming that are not eligible. Okay, you want to hold on to invoices, emails, statements, anything you get that is your proof of what you've paid through those accounts. So if anybody was to go back and look at those accounts and look at those payments, they would know exactly what the item was, who requested it, the date of the request, and again, it can be paid by your school administration, so it could be something that the principal's paid for, and then you're reimbursing the principal, but you still need the receipt or invoice for what you are reimbursing that principal, that school, that teacher for whatever they've purchased. Okay, all records should be maintained or kept at the school. You should maintain all records for 7 years. If you are a treasurer, for example, who will only be working on stuff at home but has to take it home, that's totally fine. We have a binder that is that our treasurer keeps. She has the statements on there with all the invoices, with all the checks. Everything's kept in this binder. She brings it with her when she's at school. When she goes home, she takes it with her. But we only keep the current year in that binder, and the previous year is put in a folder and stored at the school. Okay. The school usually will give you a cabinet or a space that is safe and secure for PAC to be able to store their documentation. All checks, regardless of them being void or cleared, you need to hold on to them. So even if you have a void check, write void on it, and attach it to your documents in your binder. Keep all of those records. Some banks will give you a check images. They don't return the original checks to you, which is totally fine as well. And that isn't, as long as you can see the image of the check, that's totally fine as well. Next, we want to sort of look at cash. So a lot of individuals, when you do fundraisers at the school, you always want to make sure that the cash fund that you receive during these fundraisers, they are counted at the school. So if the fundraiser is taking place at the school, you want to make sure there's 2 people counting that cash, double checking it, and then you can give custody of the cash to your treasurer or to whomever is going to deposit it. If you're able to leave it at the school, store it in a safe, in a locked cabinet, that would be ideal. But if not, and somebody's taking it home with them, that is fine. But as long as 2 people have verified the amount of money and completed deposit requisitions for those, that would be the ideal way to make sure that that money goes with that individual. Even if it's late, and I know a lot of our fundraisers go late, and it's like all counted in the morning. You can count it in the morning, but you have to leave it at the school then. If you're going to take it out of the school, you want to make sure it's counted. Then the funds should be deposited within a day or so into your account. You want to make sure you get a receipt for that deposit, and you want to verify it when you get your statement that the deposit amount was correct. Checks. So all checks that are issued by PAC, doesn't matter if it's out of general account or out of gaming, it has to have 2 to sign. So even now with e-transfers, there is always 2 to sign. So, for example, I can set up an e-transfer to go to a vendor for reimbursement of a cost, and then another individual that's on the PAC executive also should be on that account as an authorized user. They, as authorized signatory, they then go in through their online access and approve that e-transfer. It should never be one person signing off on any one of the e-transfers in any way whatsoever. Writing checks, you should have 2 to sign. The other thing that I know that you can do, even if you're transferring funds between gaming to admin or admin to gaming, you need to do that. So you put that request in, and then again, the other individual goes in and verifies and then allows for it. The one thing you are not allowed to do out of most of these accounts is transfer the funds to, like, let's say if you have a Coast Capital account, you cannot transfer from Coast Capital to your personal Coast Capital account. That is not allowed. And if it's your funds, so for example, I am the one that's getting reimbursed, I'm the treasurer, then 2 other people should be signing off on that e-transfer or that check. It should not be you signing off on yours. And if you are, then you need it documented on your minutes. You need to disclose that information because, again, if you're limited to the number of bodies on your PAC, you don't want to be seen as taking money out of gaming or out of general account without a clear understanding of what those funds were for. So all original statements for your bank account should always be coming to the school. Their mailing address should be the school. It should never be your personal email or your personal home address. So as a PAC, you want to make sure the address with the bank is the school's address. All original bank statements need to come to the school. And the reason for this, it's been like this for years and years, but we have seen it where statements were going to a treasurer's home. They were falsifying those statements and showing incorrect statements to the school. And when they left and new PAC came in, the school was out, or the PAC account was out a lot of money. So you definitely want to make sure you have these safeguards in place. You don't want to be putting anybody in a situation where accessing those funds is easy. Okay, there's a question I'm just reading. How do you address a member that keeps counting money by themselves at events after you have said? What you need to do is you need to put in a process in place. I actually have a deposit requisition form that I've done up. And you can do that. You can find them online. And what it is on there, it says the number of bills. So it's okay if he or she wants to count all that money after the event, no problem. But there needs to be a second person that verifies what they've counted. And if that person is not okay with that, then that person should not be the person counting money. Right? So you can say, hey, I will count it first, and then you can absolutely verify it and you can take it home. Not a problem. But there always should be two people counting that money and verifying whatever is written on that requisition.
So just to add a little bit to what Lakbir was saying in the previous slides, some councils, they have in their budget a line labeled miscellaneous. Now this would be out of the general account. You wouldn't be able to have this in the gaming budget. So the miscellaneous amount for some schools I've seen are between 200 and 500 to allow a little bit of leeway in between meetings should something arise that the PAC needs to use funds for. An example I can provide is at our past school, we had the popcorn machine break down and we needed to send it in for servicing. So the funds to fix the popcorn machine, since we did need to use the popcorn machine within I believe it was 1 or 2 weeks, and the general meeting was not until next month, the funds were taken from that line. The payment was made to the vendor, and the receipt was then presented at the next general meeting that funds were used out of the miscellaneous line to pay for the fixing of the popcorn machine. So that's just one example of what miscellaneous could be used for in between meetings, because you can't have a discussion, you can't put an amount for a vote. It's something that you need to do right away, so that would be your emergency funds, so to speak. And then the other thing to mention is floats. Floats are not necessarily recommended to be made out cash. Floats should be made out to the person who is in charge of the float or who is responsible for the float. So on the check, you would write an amount. Let's say that you agreed that your float should be $200 in various bills and coins. You would make the check out of your general account for float. You would make it out to the individual who is responsible for that float. You would not make it out to cash. And in the line where it says at the bottom left-hand corner, there's a line to put a reason for it. You would put under there float, and then for whatever event it is that you're providing that float. That way, that amount is provided to the individual. At the end of the event, once the cash has been counted, an amount can be deducted and put together in a deposit form, where the deposit form would then be labeled float for whatever the title of the event is, and it would be in the amount of $200 going back into the account. That is the proper way to trace and keep track of a float for any of your events.
So this is really, really important. I understand at the elementary school, it's much harder to do than at the high school level, but budgeting is so very important. And the reason why is you want to know where your gaming funds are going, because you do have 36 months in which to use gaming funds, but you want to make sure you're using them in a way that is beneficial for the kids in the school in that year. Because the reason is you're getting $20 per student that comes into gaming funds. You want to make sure that the funds that came in were used by the kids that are in the school, especially if they're in grade 7, they're going to be moving to high school. And if you didn't use them and you're trying to keep them for a bigger event 2 years down the road, then you're not benefiting the kids that are in that school that current year. So it's a best practice to use the majority of the funds each year within the school year that you receive those funds. But you do have 36 months to use those funds. Budgeting, what it does is it allows for you to be transparent with your parents as well as with your school administration as to what kind of things you would like to see funded through that school year. So what I did at the elementary school was I would ask for a teacher's wish list. we, as parents, we would hold a meeting that was outside of the administration. We would go over all of the wish list items. We would decide on which ones we were going to approve. We would set the budget based on that, and that's what we would approve. So moving forward, the teachers knew what we were funding, the administration knew what we were funding, and then so did the parents, right? So if we were short in our budget, then we knew what kind of fundraisers we need to do. At the high school, it's a little bit different because the amount of money we get is quite substantial. So again, what we do is in June is we send out an application to the teachers and all the clubs that are at the high school. They have to make an application and they have to send it back to the PAC. That application can be, again, really simple as to who, what activity, what club is this for, how many kids does it benefit, what is the intent of the club, how much money are you going to need, what are you going to use it for, so on, right? So it asks a bunch of questions so you know where the money's going to go. And then when you get all those applications, you form a budget committee in September, and then you look at all those requests that have come in, and then you approve the ones that you wish to fund based on your budget. And then again, once you've approved it, you present it at the next October meeting, which is where it gets approved. Once it's approved, you notify the teachers and the administration, and then they know for the year what you've approved. There's no surprises, and you're basically receiving their request, receiving the invoices for all the approvals that you've already made. Okay, those tend to be the best way to handle gaming funds and as well as setting your budget. We do that at DPAC as well. I submit a budget every year. Everybody knows what we're spending our money on. We know where our money is coming from, and then throughout the year we spend it. I keep all the invoices, keep all the receipts, and then I do a reconciliation at the end. So amending the budget, similar to at the high school, it doesn't happen as at all. Actually, most high schools tend not to go down the amending the budget, but it does happen at times for whatever reason. Maybe they don't need it for the intent that they had it originally for, and now they would like it directed somewhere else. So then in that case, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are using the funds for the kids for non-instructional reasons. So gaming funds. I just want to really spend maybe about 3 minutes, not too long on this, but definitely you want to go to BC Gaming site if you don't know enough about it, but you really want to make sure where you're spending your money is for the kids. So PAC Gaming Funds is intended to benefit students by enhancing extracurricular opportunities for students, okay?
Just to add to what Lakbir was saying, I've highlighted here in yellow that funds may not be used for or transferred to curricular purposes or to schools or school districts for any of their activities or programs. So just keep that in mind. Make sure that you are getting the receipts from the district or from the school for whatever the amount it is. An example could be that the school paid for the bus to take the children to a field trip, and they're requesting that the funds be paid out from the PAC Gaming account under the field trips that you have already allocated. For that to take place, you would need to have the school provide you with the receipt for that bus, and then you would provide them either with a check to the bus company for the amount, or you would provide the school with the check for the amount that they paid for the school bus. However, as per gaming rules, you need to have the original receipt when using gaming funds. So you would need to have a discussion with your school that they need to provide you with a receipt for that amount from the bus company, not one that would be coming from the school saying this amount was paid for the bus. You need to actually see the invoice that is coming from the bus company in order to be able to write them a check that is going towards the payment of that bus. So I know that some clerks have been in some schools for quite some time, and their way of doing things has been a little bit different. In the past, we have heard of many PACs that used to just cut a blank check or a check with just a large sum of money, and they would transfer that over to the school. The school would then use the funds as needed here and there, and in some cases return what wasn't used back to the PAC. In some cases, that money would just roll over to the next year. However, those funds are gaming funds. You're more than welcome to do that with your general account if that's how you want to continue with that step. But when it comes to gaming, unfortunately, the rules have been that you need to have a receipt to be able to write a check. So if that receipt is coming from the school for something that they paid for, we need to see the receipt for what it is that they paid for, and then you need to cut them a check for exactly that amount. And I know that that has changed over the years, and it is probably going to take a little bit of time for your school to get used to that new process. However, we have heard of many PACs that are being audited. When the gaming branch asks the PAC what the check was for, especially when it's a large amount that covers a lot of expenses, we're running into situations where some PACs are unable to explain what the amounts were for. And in order to avoid that, gaming now requires the receipts. It's very easy to just say, here's the receipts for all of the amounts. We cut the check, the school a check for $5,000, but here's the stack of receipts that equals to $5,000. You know, buses, entrance to the aquarium, entrance to the zoo, all of that, it all equals up to the $5,000. And gaming would love you for that, because that's exactly what they want to see. They want to see receipts for every single amount that has been spent. They don't want a blanket amount. And that's the areas that we're running into right now, where we're trying to help PACs with their audit, and we can't explain what some of the amounts are, especially when the year that they're being audited for is the previous year and up to 2 or 3 years before that. And this is a brand new executive that has come in. So in order to start best practice moving forward, making sure that everything is in order for succession planning for when you exit the PAC, you should be doing it proper today, so that way it doesn't affect those to take over positions in the future.
So you want to make sure that you're supporting field trips, you're supporting presentations and performances at your school. So music, theater, science. You want to make sure you're encouraging PAC school spirit and family engagement. So school carnivals are allowed, movie nights are allowed, dances are allowed, social activities are allowed. Entertainment and leisure activities such as buying books, numerous books, so you can do a book club, comic books, magazines, fiction, nonfiction books, board games, coloring books, chessboards. So many things you can do. You can use the gaming funds for beautification of common spaces, so such as like doing a mural or getting some art piece for the school, or sensory passages for the school, holiday decorations. It could be anything. You can encourage newsletters and yearbooks at the school. You can encourage writing clubs, debate clubs, music bands, but it cannot be curriculum related. Okay, so no laptops for a classroom for a teacher to use so she can teach a lesson, no. But you can buy a laptop or an iPad for, let's say, the robotics club, or the individual putting the yearbook together, or doing a photography club. You can help with the accessories to help fund a photography club. Our elementary school had an aquarium that was put in the hallway that was funded through gaming funds. This was an aquarium seen by all kids, and there was for their use and their pleasure. It was not for a teachers taught with it as well, but the majority of it was for our parents and our kids to see sea aquarium in our hallways. You can use it for student recognition. You can use it for trophies, certificates, memorabilia, that kind of stuff. You can use some of it to do playground equipment or enhancements that are outside of what the school district can fund it and pay for it. You can use your funds for emergency and safety and earthquake related supplies and equipment. And you can, this year only, final year, unfortunately, you can use it for scholarships and bursaries. Next year, you will not be allowed to. Gaming has decided that that is not an eligible expense moving forward, so that will no longer be on there.
Thank you so much, Luckbeer, for taking the time to provide us with all of that information. I know it's a lot, and we always encourage you to contact Surrey DPAC if you have further questions. Luckbeer has invested so much of her time to learn the processes of gaming, and so we're very thankful for her being able to provide us with that insight into gaming tonight. So just to add to what she was saying about scholarships, I know that there are a lot of PACs out there that used to provide, in elementary school anyways, they used to provide scholarships to the high school, and unfortunately that will be coming to an end. So just please make sure that you keep track of the time frame and that you check back to the gaming guidelines to see if there has been any updates about that. So in 2023-24 school year, scholarships and bursaries will no longer be eligible use of gaming funds. And just for the last note there, to also keep in mind that gaming is fully aware of PACs purchasing equipment for the school, or for their use, I should say. As an example would be a PAC barbecue. And the ownership of that barbecue can be transferred over to the school, so that way it is covered under the liability insurance or for storage purposes, because some PACs are storing it in the school. And should something happen to that barbecue and it should go missing, if the school gets broken into, then the insurance would be able to cover it if the ownership of that barbecue belongs to the school. We did have a PAC where that actually did happen, and one of the school years the barbecue was not covered because the ownership of the barbecue was the PAC's, and so insurance doesn't cover such things like that. So you need to have the conversation with your principal and outline exactly what is to happen with equipment that you are leaving at the school that actually belongs to the PAC. So that the administration is fully aware that should anything happen to it, if insurance is going to cover the damage while it is on school property. So there are more slides that are included on here. We'll go over those in a little bit, but we encourage you to always visit the gaming website and to check out their frequently asked questions for more specific information. Or if you do have any questions specific to your situation, we encourage you to send gaming an email or give them a phone call. They are great. They will answer your questions the best to their knowledge, and it's better to ask them directly instead of assuming or asking others and doing what others might have done, because we have known that in the past some things were done differently and there have been a lot of changes. We wouldn't want you to be in a situation where your school is being audited and you're being questioned for the use of funds that maybe were relevant 2 or 3 years ago, but no longer apply this year. So it's best to always just contact gaming to get further clarification if you're planning on using gaming funds for a specific event or a purchase, and you want to know if it actually does qualify under gaming. So on this slide, we are going to talk about the gaming account summary report. Now, this report is due 90 days after your organization's fiscal year. So for most PACs, that is June 30th at the end of school. 90 days after that, you have to file a gaming account summary report. This form can be found on the gaming website, and you can download it and fill it out. And then just submit it. It does require 2 signatures. Usually it's the treasurer and one other, like the president or vice president. Please make sure that you are reading what the treasurer is writing in there, and make sure that both of you are looking to see that it makes sense to you, so that way you won't have gaming come back and ask you for more questions. They ask for a list of all disbursements and or reimbursements, and you do need to provide check numbers, who the person that you paid it out to, what the purpose of the payment was, and how much was paid out to them. They're also asking for more details. They don't want just, a check that was written out to the school for field trips. They don't want that. They want actual details, that there was field trips to take the children out on extracurricular activities. So many, grades 5, 6, and 7 went on this field trip. And the buses were paid for, which of course you would have a copy of the receipt. The entrance to the field trip were paid for, and so then you would sort of have an idea as to how many children that covered. So they want a little bit more detail. They don't want just a blanket answer as to what funds were used for. If you provide a blanket answer, they will be coming and asking. That is what we are hearing from PACs now, that they are being questioned to provide more detail as to what exactly funds are being used for. So just make sure that you keep that in mind. And just to touch on other groups within your school, such as grade 7s or dry grad. Now, the way that these groups form or function or are governed, that's not the responsibility of PAC, okay? PAC is all parents from a school, and then those parents elect an executive, so that's your PAC executive. And the decisions that the PAC makes has to do with events that apply to everyone. The grade 7s, usually they have the grade 7 parents form their own little group, and they do their own fundraising towards events for their grade 7s. Now, in order to be fair, what some schools have been doing is that they're taking for that year the $20 per student and providing those funds to the grade 7 group to use for their year-end celebrations, because as you know, grade 7s, they do go on field trips as well, and sometimes they don't, the field trips that they take are not necessarily outside of their grade 7 functions, so that's something to also consider. That way that they get their fair amount of money going towards them, instead of just keeping it in a bulk amount that applies to everyone in the school. We know that some classes don't necessarily use their field trip funds for those PACs that have the gaming funds towards field trip funds. So it is always to keep in mind these groups that are forming out there, and perhaps just put a motion on the floor to provide them with their $20 per student amount, so that way it goes towards that student for that school year. I've seen this happen again in some high schools where the motion is put on the floor when they're discussing the budgeting and planning the budgeting to have the $20 per graduating student for that amount to be made out to the school. The school then holds it for the dry grad committee to be able to use it in their planning of their dry grad. Now that right there, it does help them in fundraising because we all know that dry grads can be quite expensive. So if that's something that you as a dry grad parent are thinking about doing, it would be made as a motion when the PAC is discussing the budgeting, to put a motion on the floor to ask that the $20 per student graduating that year be applied, be made out to the school so that they could use it for the dry grad activities. Now, what it is recommended is that dry grads and grade 7s or any of these groups, that they do meet with the principal and the PAC executive just so that you're all on the same page, especially at the elementary level where there's a lot of fundraising going on. You wouldn't want to have events overlapping. For some inner city schools, this is a bit of an issue because it does put restraint on the families wishing to participate. Their funds are not that much to be spending on all events, and so then they have to make a choice. And instead of doing that, it is recommended that the events are spaced out in a way that families are able to participate and also be able to afford it. So it is a good idea to set up a meeting with any of these groups that exist within your school and your principal, and then you just have a very short and quick discussion as to what fundraising is going to look like for that year. For events that require gaming licenses, like 50-50 draws, bingo, raffles, all of that stuff, it does need to be applied for by the PAC executive. This is something that has changed in the recent years. Before, any group could form and apply to gaming for their own license, so that then, as an example, the dry grad committee could apply for raffles that they were going to be selling. Unfortunately, that has changed. It all has to be funneled through the one gaming account that the school has, and which is also run by the PAC executive. So these groups would now have to talk to the treasurer within the PAC executive, ask them to apply for their 50-50 draw license. They would then have to coordinate with them what that's going to look like and how much money was earned from that. The money must be deposited in the PAC gaming account and held for that group. And then, so if the money is now in the PAC gaming account, they also need to disperse it out of that account. So let's say that dry grad did a 50-50 draw, and they put that money into the gaming account. It's all accounted for. The treasurer has records of all of these amounts to then report on the 50-50 at the end of the school year, as well as the gaming report that has to be done for any events. The treasurer would be completing that. And once dry grad is ready to use the funds, they would need to then ask the treasurer to write a check. Let's say they were going to use it to pay for the buses to shuttle the students to wherever the event is being held. They would then cut a check to the school to pay for the buses, and they would need an invoice for that. So there's a lot of changes there. And so this is why we're recommending that a bridge be created that joins the groups to the PAC executive when it comes to gaming funds or gaming events. So this is very important. However, again, these groups are self-governing, and that responsibility does not fall on the PAC as to how they work, what events they plan, anything that these groups are doing. It is not the responsibility of PAC. So the PAC unfortunately can't tell them what they can use their funds for. They just have to make sure that it falls within the guidelines of gaming. That's it. That's the only responsibility that the PAC has. And then of course to apply for their gaming event licenses and to create the reports that are due once the event is over, and then of course to include it in the gaming account summary report at the end of the year. Okay, so this is just included for your information. You can, as mentioned before, you can find this information online by going to the gaming licensee website, and you could always just Google gaming license, and then this information will come up, and it will have the forms that you need to fill out available online as well. We're just putting it here for a quick reference as to what might apply if you're applying for a Class B gaming license. So the other type of gaming license that you could get is the Class D. So more information about that, again, can be found online, but I included it on here just as a quick reference for you. So if you are unsure as to which one applies to your event, the best option would be to contact gaming directly. For the Class D, it does take up to 10 days, so make sure that you are applying for it well in advance. At the very bottom, you'll see it says, after events, the responsible officers must complete a report on the event. And it would be an online submission for the gaming event revenue report. Now this is the part that I was mentioning, that let's say that it's a grade 7 group or a band group or dry grad that is putting this event on. The organizer of the event needs to work along with the treasurer of the PAC that belongs to that high school or that elementary school. And the reason is because the license must be applied for using the PAC licensing number, and so that puts the treasurer as a responsible officer for the event. And then they also have to, along with the organizer, complete the gaming event revenue report online. So both parties need to know what's going on, what the event is, how many tickets were sold, how much revenue there was. If it was a 50-50, how much was given to the person who won the draw for the 50-50. All of that information must be provided to the treasurer, so that then the treasurer can complete the gaming event revenue report online. So this is why we were mentioning it now, that it's best that at the start of the year, a relationship is built between the treasurer and any of these groups that you know, like year after year, continue to form within your schools. So I know in my child's high school, they have band, the jazz club, and so they do their own fundraising. So the same thing has been encouraged to them to reach out to PAC, organize together, especially when they're doing the raffles. So this year I know that they're not doing it, so there wouldn't necessarily be any need to meet with the PAC, but should there be raffles coming up later on in the year, that conversation needs to happen with the treasurer, because the treasurer is the one who's responsible for reporting it to the gaming branch. So all of this information again is online, but the best advice is from gaming. So if you have any questions to do with what licenses to get, how to apply for it, your best option is to contact gaming. They have their email online. They have a phone number as well that you can call and talk to. My advice would be to email them, because then that way you get the response in writing. And when you get a response in writing, it's easier to share it with others in a clear and understanding way instead of hearsay. So what I do is I send an email asking specific questions. You know, for example, I'm planning a fun night. I want to do a 50-50. What type of a license would I need? We're thinking that we're probably going to sell tickets and maybe generate around $500. Or we want to do raffles. How would that look like? We have different options for our raffle prices. They vary in value. And so that's something important too to remember, that there are different categories. So if we have two different raffles and one ticket is selling for $2 and the other ticket is selling for $5, there are specifics that go with having two different prices, and there actually is a way to report that, and it must be tracked. The number of tickets that you print sell also has to be tracked. So if you have 100 for the $2 ones and only 50 at the $5 ones, that needs to be tracked. And then once you've printed them and then you start your sales and you complete your sales, you then at the end need to report 100 tickets were printed, only 80 were sold. 50 tickets were printed, only 30 of them were sold. So you actually need to keep all of that type of information down. But again, Gaming Branch will walk you through it. And if you send them an email with as much detail as possible, specific, and also very clear questions as to what it is that you're asking, they will gladly give you a hand. So that wraps up our PAC 101. I hope that you have learned something from this presentation. Best advice at the end of it all is come back to it. It's audio. There's no video to watch unless you're going to read the slides, of course. What I do is with information that I'm trying to retain, I usually go back and I read it and review it, more than once or twice. Especially when it's an audio. If it's a video, I just have it playing on my phone with my headphones, not necessarily watching the video, but just listening to the audio. And that's a good way to get the information to stick in your mind. I know that for myself, it takes me a while to retain information, but when you're in a position of a leadership role, it is your responsibility to be up to date with all of the guidelines that are out there, all of the procedures that apply to you as a PAC, to be up to date with your constitution and your bylaws. The last thing you want to do is do something that goes against your constitution and bylaws because you don't know your constitution and bylaws, and then have a parent point that out. It's embarrassing for everybody, and you just don't want to be in that position. So the best way to avoid something like that is to be well informed yourself, and then to also turn around and share that knowledge. So make it a habit, at your meetings, to always add something, some sort of information that teaches your parents a little bit more about PAC. So maybe, just a quick 5 minutes. I was reading the Constitution and bylaws, and I noticed that there are some changes that are needed. We should think about changing our Constitution and bylaws. And has anybody read what's on page, 4, as an example, right? Just to get the conversation started. And then if everybody looks at you kind of in awe because you can tell that they haven't read it, that's an indication to you, to then step up and say, it is important for all of us to know our Constitution and bylaws, to understand that we have the right to speak and be heard, and that the way that we do business is based on the majority. And then that'll also educate parents out there who don't understand how voting happens, how the planning process happens, how budgets are approved. We get a lot of emails asking about budgets being voted on and why they were voted on the way that they were. So if we're getting the emails asking things like that and they've already attended your meeting, that means that not enough information is being provided, or the parents that are coming to your PAC meetings are uneducated about how PAC meetings work. So it's something to take back, something to consider, and start making part of your routine when having general meetings, is to just add a little bit to start a discussion on educating your parents about how PAC meetings function. If you have any questions, you could always email us, and we can always look into finding the best answer that applies to your situation. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this and to read all of the slides. And with that, I say thank you. PAC Finance 101.